Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest IIRSM East Anglian branch webinar. Before we start, we have our own branch secretary, Justin Sebastian Strange, the UK Health and Safety Manager at Go Brands UK, who's going to talk to us about how to create a safety culture in hospitality. But as you will find throughout his presentation, the findings and his comments are not just linked solely to the hospitality industry. I would also like to mention that recently, the branch has appointed 2 CPD and training coordinators in the names of Julie Jarvie and Michelle Moore, who commenced with the East Anglian Branch Committee in August 2023. Once they have got familiar with our ways of working, we will be looking to offer the membership with support with their CPD and training requirements. In the interim, if anyone has any queries regarding CPD, they are welcome to contact me, Tony Hayward, Branch Chairman. I would also point out that on the 11th of September 2023, at 1300, we are lucky enough to have Christian Harris present a webinar to us on how to use science to prevent slips and trips accidents this September. That should be an interesting event and worth signing up for. I would also point out that before I hand over to Justin, can you use the Q&A buttons for any questions that you may have? So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Justin Sebastian Strange on how to create a safety culture in hospitality. Thank you, Justin.
Pleasure, Tony. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Right, how to create a safety culture. Well, I think the next slide will probably give you the best answer. And that is basically saying it's a disingenuous presentation. Because, to be honest, I absolutely don't know. I really don't, in hospitality, know how to create a perfect safety culture. I've been trying to rack my brains for years on how to do it. So I thought the best, topic to do is to say how to microwave eggs, a questionable safety in commercial kitchens. So that's what I thought would be the better topic, to talk about. So I thought I'd do this by starting out with a video. If you'd like to put your sound on, which I'm hoping you are because you were listening to me, this will be good.
Inside there is a hard-boiled egg. In a bowl, microwave it.
Oh, typical.
See what happens. We're under the impression it's going to explode based on all of our history. Okay, 1 minute in the microwave.
I know, the smart one. This guy move.
Right. So one of my friends said, when I told him about the topic of this presentation, how to microwave eggs, he basically said, shouldn't the entire topic just be don't? And I said, well, no, that's not true, because you can microwave eggs safely. You just need to actually understand how and why. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because realistically, I learned about how microwaving eggs at a very young age when back in the very early 80s, my grandfather's next door neighbor decided that he bought a very new microwave, the ones that looked like a giant television. And he decided that he would microwave 24 eggs in the cardboard containers, stuck them in there. And my grandfather heard the explosion from next door, came running over to find his neighbor's wife basically in shock. after the microwave had exited the kitchen through the window and the door had come off and hit her husband, and unfortunately he was fatally injured. So from the age of 10, I knew that eggs are very, very dangerous to microwave. Now, later on in my life, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was asked to investigate a situation where I got a phone call and said, "Hey, Justin, can you go and investigate this restaurant? A woman's been given 2nd and 3rd degree burns from a poached egg," which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, how can you get 2nd and 3rd degree burns from a poached egg? It's impossible. Until I went down to the restaurant and said, "Can you show me what happened?" And they walked me through, they gave me the CCTV footage, and basically the woman had done exactly the same thing. They'd microwaved the poached egg, touched it, and it exploded onto her, all over her chest and face. And of course, it made me, during the investigation, it made me wonder why a qualified chef would actually do that. Why would they microwave an egg when they had a sous vide water bath there and everything else? And so the process, they had an SOP, they had risk assessments, they had everything to say basically poached eggs were pre-done from the central production unit, put into a sous vide water bath and maintained at a temperature of 56 degrees. So they're always a little bit runny. So why did he do it? And it was because it was service. And that's what this is all about. The concept of service is beyond everything to a chef. Chefs are obsessed about speed, getting the customer happy, and just pushing those orders out. And they will take every shortcut that they can possibly do. And the reason why I know this is because I've spent 35 years in and around the hospitality industry. Initially, 20 of those years I spent as a chef. And I've probably done every bad thing that you could possibly do in a kitchen that could hurt you, and I'm still alive. One of the reasons why I wear a watch always is because one day I dropped my knife and I went to catch it and it went through my wrist. I lost a lot of blood, but I still continued with service. And when service finished, I actually went to the hospital. I waited 4 hours and lost almost a liter of blood. So that's just putting it into context for you. So strangely enough, front of house people are really good with safety. You can teach them safety very easily. You can just say to them, look, this is the consequence of what's going to happen. The customer's going to see you. Don't do something stupid. You can't tell chefs that, because chefs have been conditioned over years and years and years to just accept stupid amounts of risk. Similarly to the emergency services, soldiers, and everything else. They just don't care anymore because they have done it. Parts of your initiation is learning how to actually deal with things catching fire all the time. So looking at like this, and and I know he's actually on this webinar, he rang me one day and said, hey, one of my chefs has cut himself really badly using a Japanese mandolin. And as you can see, every chef will do this because it's faster. It's a lot faster than using a guard. It's quicker, it's easier, it's intuitive. So that's what they do. Now, they know they shouldn't, but they will still do it because of speed. So that's what happens. So I interviewed someone about this, and if you can just read through it by yourself, and I'll just talk over it. Basically, this is someone who knows the risk, cut themselves, and didn't go to hospital. I did the same thing, or I burnt myself so badly, I turned up to hospital 6 hours later, and the ER team basically said, with me still in my chef whites, said, why are you chefs all like this? If you'd come 6 hours earlier, we could have saved that part of your arm. And I went, it's Friday night service, when am I going to leave? And this is the problem with safety culture in kitchens. There's a
Justin, I'm
Yes.
really sorry to interrupt, but we're losing your sound a little bit. Could you pop your camera off and hopefully that will solve the issue?
Certainly can.
Thank you. I've done that for you.
Thank you. How's that?
That's much
So-
better.
Right. So these are photos of chefs. Chefs love the rite of passage of burns. When you try to explain to a chef the risk of safety and you say to them, if you don't do this, you're going to get cut. And they go, well, I get cut anyway. If you don't do this, you're going to get burnt. Well, I get burnt anyway. If you do this, you're going to slip. I slip all the time. So how do you create the safety culture in the back of house when they've already accepted that they're going to get hurt? And it's a really complicated scenario. And I don't want to make it seem like that I have an answer when I actually really don't. I've created good, safe working kitchens. And I've worked with people who have good, safe working kitchens, but I really don't know how to do it. And it's one of these things, which is the strange thing about this webinar, is more that I wanted to kind of say to people, hey, I've been around this industry for a long time, but it's really hard because these guys are proudly showing their burns. This is something that they do. They deal with fire all the time. It doesn't faze them. This is what normal people would go, okay, that's dangerous, but these guys don't. So what's the answer? What we have currently in the hospitality industry is a compliance culture over a safety culture. So what we've done is we've created checklists. So every day we do the opening checks, we do the closing checks, we do safety checks, and mostly, if you've worked with chefs and hospitality people, you know most of those checks are fraudulent because they're not doing them. A few people are, a lot of them aren't. But the idea is if you can get rid of the idea of compliance and just say, look, we don't care if you check a box. We just want you to go home safe. And you can try to convince them that that's what you're there for. And you can teach them how to save time and energy. They will start to look at safety first, because for a chef, speed is everything. For a normal person, an hour in a day is 4 hours for a chef in a kitchen. So they work long shifts, they don't need more checks. So part of that is to say, okay, well, if we do need checklists, and we may, some do, EHOs like myself, like to see a checklist. We like to see that something's being done. But what you need to do is sit back and watch and understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. Because I went and did an audit on one restaurant, and it was a clearly broken RoboCoupe blender. And I said to the guy, you're still using that? And he said, no, I'm not using it at all. And I went, you clearly are. And he went, well, what makes you think that? He goes, because I think, you don't understand what's going on here. And I went, if you're not using that RoboCoupe, then why is a chopstick next to it? Now, if you've been in a kitchen and you know how a RoboCoupe works, you know that if it breaks, you can override the safety mechanism by using a chopstick to push down the safety release. So you can operate that RoboCoupe without the lid on. Most people don't know that. They would walk in and they'd look at it and go, well, it's just a chopstick next to a blender. It takes a chef to know a chef. Chefs will learn how to rebuild something with elastic bands. They are the MacGyvers of the world. And you have to understand why. So you have to stop, and instead of trying to create something for them to tick a box so that you go, well, we're safe, and so the EHO will be happy and the HSE will be happy and our health and safety auditor will be happy. Sit and watch them and understand how they move and how they work and how they run in a kitchen, and then look at it and go, okay, this is working, this isn't working. Let's try to twist it and say, right, you're going to do something stupid. Let's try to see if we can find the smartest, safest way of doing something stupid, which I know may sound counterproductive, but it does actually work. Years ago, I convinced the chef to not do something by saying, look, if I tell you how to do this, it could save you 3% on your wage costings. And he was happy. 3% was an absolute godsend to him. And he listened. So in that, reduce your compliance checks. It's just Sydney Decker, who is one of my favorite health and safety people in the world, he talks about safety for safety's sake and compliance for compliance sake. The idea of just constantly saying, right, we need you to check a box, we need you to do these things, instead of just instinctively trusting that your staff have the skills and ability to do it, and then visually watching it occur, so that way you can then check the compliance by actual actions, is a lot better than trying to get them to do it, because all you're doing is adding another layer of time. In my current role with Go Brands, I have opening and closing checks. I know that my staff are currently not probing every fridge twice a day and recording that. They say they're doing it, but I know they're not. They are going around and they are visually checking the LED display. So if they're going to do that, why am I telling them to probe it if they're not going to do it? Because if they do that, it takes an hour and a half each day, twice a day. And that's time that they don't have to do other things like moving stock in and stock out and setting up the day for 1,000 orders that are going to come through. Do they need to do it? Do they need to actually go around and check? Can they not just put their hand in the fridge and say, yep, that fridge is cold, done. And where it's not, then they check and do a compliance check if there's a fault. And that's probably the better way to do it, because you're giving hospitality time, and time is everything in a kitchen. It's the speed and stress that you're adding, and all they're going to do is tick a box and say, yes, I did it. And you will get some people who are doing it, but they won't. So prioritize consequences over results. Now, I say this because to get a whole bunch of people to do something really, really safe, I had to explain them the consequence. And the consequence was saying, don't walk up these stairs carrying 30 kilos worth of drinks, because if you fall, you're going to get hurt. Now, the guy I told, after I'd done his health and safety induction training and everything else, an hour later, I saw him carrying 30 kilos, and he was big. He was very muscular. He had the height, he had the build, and he could carry it with ease. So I had to stop, regroup everyone again and say, look, if this happens, this is the consequence. You will fall backwards. The boxes will shift towards your throat. And if you are very lucky, you will die. If you are unlucky, you will be permanently disabled. And that is not a great thing in this country, unfortunately to say. So explaining the consequence, instead of saying, oh, look, it's going to be faster, you just go, look, do it slower, and you can still do it better, but you can still move, because you'll be able to go up and down faster. So you've got to explain the consequences in hospitality without the results, and saying, okay, well, it'll get done, it'll get done. And it's complicated in a way, because people don't want to do something if it's going to take them longer, and they don't want to do it. I mean, we all don't want to do it. It's just one of those things. You want to do it as quickly as you can, as safely as you can, to some extent. It's like changing a light bulb on standing on the edge of a bathtub. We've all done it. It's not safe, but it's a little bit faster. But after you've done it wrong once, you then adjust that safe system of work and go, well, I won't wear my socks anymore, so I won't slip as easy. So again, going back to watching and learning, learn why they do it and learn how you can do it the way that they can do it to prevent the consequences of something going wrong. So it gives them the results. Explain the consequences, but give them the results that they want to do anyway. So that's almost the end of it, but it's not really. So what is the final answer? As I said, I've been in this industry for so long And my partner, who's in health and safety as well, was saying to me a couple of days ago, she goes, when I first said to her, I didn't know how to create a safety culture in hospitality. And she went, of all the people and all the things and all the countries that you've seen, you've got to be able to do it. You've got to be able to bridge the gap. And then over the years, she's kind of said, it's true. It's impossible. It's almost like we need an exemption for kitchens. When I worked in Australia, I remember talking to someone from WorkSafe, which is the equivalent of the HSE here. And I said to him, why do you never come to a kitchen if there's an issue? And Mark said to me, he went, what is the point? Because I can go to a chef and say, don't do that, but he's going to do it as soon as I turn my back. And that's when I realized that there's got to be something, some way of communicating to a chef and kitchen people, to some extent, as I said, for front of house, how to actually get them to do what they need to do. And the only way that I've learned is to basically actually listen to them and try to work out what they really, really want. Because no one does it. I know a lot of people, and this may upset a lot of people, but I know a lot of people who are health and safety people for large restaurant chains. And I was one of them. And what happens is we think if we give someone a list of things that we want them to do, that they're going to do it, and it's going to create something safe, and they're just going to go ahead. But we want to create a system where people are really happy to report near misses and not incidences. So then they understand that we care about them, because near misses are so important to understand in any industry, just for safety, compliance, and everything else. But it also gives us lessons learned. But kitchens, they kind of go, oh, well, you don't want every little cut coming up. And you go, yes, I do. I want every little cut, that you know about. Every time you have a partial slip, a slight burn, I want to know those things, because then I can understand your environment, because then I can make your environment safer. It's not going to be 100% safe. It may only be 90% safe. But if I can shave 10 more points into that equation, then it would be brilliant. And then they may actually listen to me. If I can make their life faster, smoother, they will listen to me. And then they will start to actually think about their own ability to manage safety themselves, and then start to look at risk a little bit differently. Because at the moment, they accept it so much. And I'm very, very hesitant to kind of lecture people on safety a lot of the time, because I know what I was like when I was in kitchen. And if you've been in kitchen for a long period of time, you kind of know that you're going to do something stupid pretty much all the time. I did have one chef say to me once that you're not a true chef unless you've cut yourself or burnt yourself or anything else. And I've been unfortunate in my career to have not only broken my back at work, to have severed arteries, to have got third-degree burns, to have been lightly stabbed, threatened, set on fire 3 times by my own stupidity. But it is all that thing where you're just looking at it going, I still don't know how to actually do this. I don't know how to communicate to chefs how to actually make their life safe. And which is why I've said this is a somewhat disingenuous presentation, because if you thought I was going to come here and say, hey, I've got an answer for you, I actually don't. I just wanted to have an open conversation about this and make people go, okay, if you got something, let us know, because this is one of those areas which we don't hear about a lot of the time in safety management and health and safety. We hear a lot about construction stuff, which is great. We hear a lot about slips and trips because they're necessary. We hear a lot about logistics and everything else, but hospitality as itself gets a little bit left behind because it's an unsolvable mess. And we can put some things in place, but they don't work. We put other things in place and they don't work. We have to deal with egos of people who are elevated to the level of gods if they're good, because we all know the Gordon Ramsays and Marco Pierre Whites, but their kitchens are still just as dangerous. So how do we do it? And that's what I really kind of wanted to kind of say. I really wanted to hear bits and pieces from the guests in this conversation, say, what do you know that I don't know? Because I've tried, I've had safer places where they've had less incidences, and I've had safer places where chefs work less hard and less hours. But then in my current role, I've still got someone who has worked 20 hours in a day and then come back 4 hours later and worked another 20 hours. And I don't know how to transfer that knowledge to people that well. And I hope that that doesn't disappoint you all, because I think it is just one of those things where sometimes you just don't know how to do something. And that's it in a nutshell. I think I'd love to give an answer, but I was really hoping that maybe some of you could, if you have any information, share it with us. And that's it. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point. But now I open it up to the people who are here.
Thank you for that, Justin. A really interesting presentation. I think we've got Jonathan here who's going to field any questions. So if anybody has any questions, if you want to pop them in the chat or the Q&A, please do so now, and Justin will aim to answer those questions for you. Do you have any questions, Jonathan?
Yes, yeah, thanks, Julie, and thanks, Justin. So yeah, really a good one to get you thinking, I think there, Justin. So thanks for pulling that together and offering those thoughts up. I mean, do you see similarities in the catering sector, especially kitchens and chefs, akin to, say, doctors and surgeons not being tolerating being questioned by junior doctors and nurses because of a hierarchical culture of
Yes,
superiority?
it is a very strange thing, because of course it depends on the kitchen. And I mean, I remember was it in 2015, I was in Vietnam and I saw one of the most amazing kitchens that I'd ever seen, where the order would go in and no one would speak. It was a completely silent kitchen. It was an open kitchen. Everyone knew their role and it moved amazingly well. But it's because the hierarchy was so structured that it came in, it moved, it moved, it moved. When I was in kitchen, and I will honestly say this, I was a nightmare chef. I was an absolute prima donna. I really was. And it was my rule or no rule. And I've known chefs like me because I grew up that way. I went through Michelin star restaurants where it was military in style. You did not question chef. And that was it. If chefs told you to go stand in the freezer for 5 hours, you would do that. And it's very similar to doctors and nurses doing silly things as well. I mean, we know doctors have a higher rate of drinking, and we know they have a higher rate of smoking, and they have a high rate of stress, and they know what it does to them. And chefs are the same. They know that type of thing. When I go to do inspections as an EHO for schools and school kitchens, they are very, very good at compliance checks. Again, they have the checklist, they do it all, but then if you stand back and watch, it's still the same stuff happens. And it has been puzzling me over my entire career of wondering why no one stops and just says, why are we doing this? They don't just question it. If they do, they don't last in kitchens. I know pretty much if you haven't lasted, I think the gauges for a chef is basically 6 years. Anything after 6 years, you've been in kitchen, you're a kind of a chef now. If it's below that, you're not. You were never a chef. You were someone who worked in the kitchen. But it is that strange thing that you just don't question it. And if you do want to question it, you generally leave the kitchen. You don't stay in that job, but you go find another one, which is why it's hard to keep chefs and it's hard to kind of plug people into spots. Kitchen like porters are so replaceable because they can just go next door and get a job. and chefs can do the same. So if they don't like it, they leave. So you can't get that bonding in unless you're in somewhere like Noma or Côte d'Argent or those high-end places where they can afford to keep people. They can just give you more money if you want it. And that's where you kind of start getting that safety culture coming in, because you've got longevity in the kitchen, but people leave so fast. And so whatever you try to put in place kind of disappears. It evaporates very fast. And it's really odd, because if they don't like it, they'll just go. And I don't think, I think in my time, I didn't have a lot of people leave my kitchen because I was so strict. And it's because I was so strict, they stayed because they thought that they had to stay. And that's in itself a little sad. And it kind of, I look back on those days and think I was not a very nice person when I was in kitchen. I hope that I'm a lot nicer now.
Suppose we'll let the people on the webinar decide that one, Justin. So there was a comment we've got here from Robert Higgins. Thanks for commenting, Robert. So his comments were, understanding the task as they really are carried out is crucial. It's the old work imagined versus work done, which absolutely see that. And also kind of agreeing with your point, saying as you've indicated, it's probably a case of making it as safe as is reasonably practicable. There will, of course, be legal standards in kitchens which must be met as a bare minimum, so not just food hygiene, but
yeah, I mean,
the obligatory Health and Safety at Work Act.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. You kind of look at it and go, okay, well, I remember, this would have been early 90s, where I wanted to get workers insurance and life insurance, and I rang up the insurance company, and they just went, no, we're not going to insure you. And I went, but why? It's a job. And they went, yeah, you're a chef. You willingly put yourself into a high stress environment, surrounded by spinning blades, boiling oil, and knives, with people who are, likely to stab you. Why would we insure you when we won't insure a soldier? And if you think about that, and you go, okay, well, it's, as I said, it's reasonably practicable. It's almost an impossible statement, because it's you're going, well, you're still likely to get hurt, but what is the tolerance that we're going to accept in the kitchen of how much injury will we allow? I know when I broke my back at work, it was a lone working situation at a very good hotel. No one found me for 3 hours. And when I wasn't sure if I would actually end up walking again. But as soon as I was able to, I was back in kitchen. There was nothing stopped me. I didn't think, oh, maybe I should get a different career, because that was clearly dangerous. I went straight back like an idiot. And, I still have problems with my back, as you can imagine. But it's just an unsafe environment, and it's trying to convince someone to do something safe that just has lost the urge to care about it anymore. It's a weird situation.
Absolutely. So we've had a question come from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, what are some of the negative safety culture indicators associated with management of health and safety in the hospitality industry? If you had to
so
identify your top three.
Top three checklists. Absolutely despise checklists. It's one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment with Go Brands, is to remove compliance checklists as much as you reasonably possible, to basically say, look, is this an app? Do we really need this, or don't we? And I think the problem is, and I've been guilty of this, as consultants, a lot of the time we tell our clients that if we give them a checklist, they'll do it, and then we're kind of, yay, we've done it, it's safe. But it's like that age-old myth that someone did it a very long time ago, and we don't know why, but it still kind of perpetrates itself within the safety industry, is that you do a risk assessment, You give everyone the risk assessment and you give them a sheet of paper that says they've read the risk assessment and therefore they understand and tolerate the risks. And we know that that's not true, because the risk assessment's for management and to communicate down to the workers the risks and put in the controls in place. It's a completely different thing. And that's the same as checklists. It's as a consultant, when I work with Food Alert and other consultancy, even with my own, you put in a checklist and you go, okay, because then you think that we're creating the belief of safety, and we're not. We're just walking through. It's not like some industries that actually really need checklists. They do need them because they're so high risk. I think of, aeronautical, oil rigs, things like that. They need to have those things in place because they are significant risks, but they are not necessary for most hospitality things. Basically, is everything in date? Is everything working? That's the two things. You could probably have 3 questions on there. Does everything work? Yes, no. If no, what doesn't work? Is everyone well? Yes, no. If not, who's not? And is everything in date? Yes, no. If not, throw it out. Simple. I think the other one that we have is this belief again. And I watched someone at one of my hotel clients running through the induction training of reading every risk assessment, and they do it in hospitality all the time. They go, here's the risk assessment. I'm going to walk you through the entire risk assessment, and now you are safe. No, they're not, because they don't know, they don't care, and let's face it, they weren't listening to you anyway. So instead of just saying, look, we've looked at a risk assessment, we've thought about it, and we know innately that you're going to potentially get hurt today. You might not, but you might do. If so, this is what you do if you do get hurt. Instead of just going, right, so a proper sort of training session. I think the last one I would say as a negative in hospitality and catering and leisure and everything else is basically treating everyone the same. So once upon a time, someone looked at the Health and Safety at Work Act and said, right, we're going to we'll make sure that everyone has a knife. Once upon a time, when I started, you had your own knives. You treasured your knives. I've still got all my chef knives, and they are very old. You treasured them, you took care of them, you looked after them. We now, in hospitality, we supply knives to everyone. They're the same knife that everyone uses. They are generally taken away once a month or so and sharpened, but they are not the knife that you need for every job. So once you used to have like 5, 6, 10, 12 dozen knives. Now you've got knife. It's this big chunky plastic thing. And basically the business has said, hey, you're now safe. You won't cut yourself because we've supplied a sharp knife, but it's too big to do fine work with. So, oh well. And that's what happens. Like, we do that type of stuff. We go, okay, well, you want to be comfortable, we'll let you have Crocs. So there's this false safety in supplying equipment that really, once upon a time, it was down to the individual to manage, and now we do it for them, and it's not good. It's poor management of safety by just saying, here's a sharp knife, off you go. It's pointless. Let them manage themselves. These guys know how to use a knife. If you say you need to buy a knife, go get one. They might have one really good one, and it'll be great. It's the one thing I do know of how to spot. If someone's very new in the kitchen, they'll have one very clean, shiny knife. And that's how you know they've only just started in kitchen, probably within the last 2 weeks to 2 months. It's the easiest giveaway. But that's my top 3 negatives: checklists, false safety, supplying stuff that you don't need, and training improbably. So I hope that's it, answers it, without a rant too much.
No. I think you've covered it fantastically. I mean, I think looking at some of the points that you came out with, I can see it all. I think we've had some other people on the webinar comment to say, yeah, agreed with you in the sense they've always taken the view, what's the benefit to the checklist? What's the quality of the checks made? What do we do with the completed checklist at the end of it? Why do we have it? And how does that particular check sheet improve health and safety at that place? Similar to myself, asking the questions, do you have a legal obligation to complete that type of monitoring? Yes, no. Does it make a boat row faster? Does
No.
it make it row safer?
It's a
not,
weird thing, isn't it, Jonathan? I mean, because
then why
we're
do
both
it?
in an industry where you look at it and go, the people who we look after, and all of us on this, this webinar, we look after people who are experts at what they do. But for some reason, at some stage, health and safety became about not listening to our experts. It became about us dictating to the experts of how to do something. And I've worked in so many places where you just say, well, why? I mean, this is the whole thing about consultation. And this is where we don't do it enough, I think, in some industries, and hospitality is one of them. We don't consult our experts enough. They know what they're doing. Most of the time, they get small, tiny burns and cuts, but we don't listen to them. We don't actually say, okay, we're going to implement this system, and we're just going to let you do it. And we've stopped doing what we're meant to do, which is to consult properly with the people who are experts at their job. And I think, I don't know when it happened. I really don't. I don't know when human resources became people and places, because we are lacking the real thing of saying, well, the real term is that is a human resource. They are a resource of knowledge and skills and abilities, and we're not allowed to call them a human resource anymore. And it's the same, health and safety. I look at a lot of health and safety professionals who don't listen to their people. They say, look, this is a safe system of work. We're going to roll it out and you're going to do it. And they won't do it. You know they won't, because it's not going to work. A bricklayer is a bricklayer. He's going to do what he needs to do. Can we make it safer? Yes. Do we just let him do his job? Yes. It would be a lot easier just to let him get on with it and then try to make it safe around him.
Bearing in mind what you just said, Justin, Tony here.
Yep.
Obviously, you've given a real insight into the real world of working as a chef, the environment, the traditions, the challenges. And I take on board, obviously, the comment you've just made. But for me, you've spoken about your experiences, your wider experiences. And bearing in mind, yesterday, what you don't know is that, yes, I did give away my white wig leaf hat. It's all eventually gone. But if there was one piece of advice, just one piece of advice that you could give to a chef in the hospitality sector, what would it be and why?
Slow down.
Sorry, I'll go again.
Slow down. That is my advice. I had a really good chef once, and oddly enough, he was actually a bricklayer during the day, and he came in to help out always on a Saturday night because it was the busiest, and he would do the pass. So he'd call the orders, and I'd always do pans because that was the fastest, highest risk, job. You had to be quick. You had to be able to catch on what's going on. And the thing he said to me, and I was just getting really, really stressed, and I was burning stuff and having to start again. Orders are piling up. And the one thing he said to me, and I have taken it all my life, is slow down. He said, one docket at a time, because the next docket's still going to be there. And so it doesn't matter, thinking about it. Move one at a time, at a time, at a time, and go through it that way. Systematically look at what you're doing. Slow down, think about it, look at it. And when I've tried to say this to chefs, and I've got them to do it, and just say, slow down, watch what you're doing. I think my first day at Food Alert, I was shadowing another consultant, and I was just standing back and watching. And I kind of said to him, to the exec chef and the exec sous chef, and I said, look, if you just stop for 5 minutes once a week and watch your staff, you will know what to train them on, because you will start to see the mistakes that they're doing, and you'll understand what you need to do. And they went, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm working in the kitchen. I see them all the time. I said, okay, well, if you stand here with me and watch what's going on, what can you see? And he said, they're doing an order. I went, yeah, but slow it down. What are they doing? Why and how are they doing it? And then he started to look and say, oh, hang about, she's just used the same tongs for the raw chicken and the cooked chicken. I went, I went, would you have noticed that if you hadn't slowed down? He went, no. And that's what I would say to all chefs. Stop and think just a bit and look at what people are doing and how they're doing it and go, okay, this is what they're doing. Is it safe? Is it suitable? Is it reliable? Or are they just doing it because they're reacting on instinct? And then if you can get that and then start to work that out, then you can actually start to figure out, you know, how do I keep my brigade safe? How can I actually make them faster, smoother, safer? And it even comes down to designing a dish. If you have to move your hands too many times to put food on a plate, you won't notice that until you actually stand back and watch how many people are doing it. You've designed a menu, it's great, looks good, sells well, but you're not actually seeing what people are doing with it. So you just stand back and watch, slow your life down just a little bit, not heaps, just a bit, and it will make the kitchen safer. It always does. End of rant.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Justin. Is there any other questions or comments, Jonathan?
No, I think we're pretty clear. I suppose we'll give a couple of seconds for any final questions to come through. We have got time for one more if there is one.
Absolutely. As I say, if there's not, I would just reiterate. Obviously, if people wish to join us on the 11th of September at 1 o'clock for our webinar with Christian Harris, people will, of course, need to register, but both IIRSM members and non-members are welcome. So that's all there is from me. If there is any further questions, you've got Jonathan in the chat.
No further questions.
Julie, is there anything else you wish to add?
No, just to thank Justin for his really interesting presentation. You don't realize what it's like in some industries. It's pretty scary at times, I would imagine, but I found it really interesting. Thank you, Justin.
I certainly would say I think it's been, I think it's been an eye-opener, because it's obviously some years since I've had any involvement in that particular sector. And dare I say, when I was working in it at the time, we were probably guilty, Justin, or the company was, not me personally, of sitting behind the checklist. So it certainly does, literally, without wishing to add a pun, give you food for thought, because, is that the right way of doing things? Is that the right way of achieving the end of result and what you want? And that is, of course, as you said, making sure that people go home from work safely. So, yeah, a really interesting presentation. I really enjoyed that. Obviously, thank you to yourself and to everyone who attended. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone for putting up with me, not really telling you much and not giving you any real ideas.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yeah,
good evening.